Hello, and welcome to another episode of Forward with me, David Herrera. Today's guest is one of my personal mentors, a truly incredible man named David Ferrera. So Dave Ferrera is a very successful engineer and entrepreneur in the medical device industry with successful exits from companies that he has founded or co-founded. He's also the author of a book called Innovation in Translation, where he tells stories and provides tips and tricks and tactics and breaks down all of the aspects needed to start a medical device company and drive it to success. So if you're interested in learning, this is one of the best primers for anybody looking to learn more about how to do that, how to be successful in starting a medical device company and making that company successful. Dave is a very dynamic and charismatic leader, and I hope you enjoy this episode where we discuss some of the lessons he's learned, including how to build winning teams in business, how coaching sports can make you a more effective business leader, and what key attributes you should look for in people that you're hiring and building your team, and how to build those teams for success, just like you would a sports team. If you have any questions about the podcast, please feel free to contact me either through our website, where there's a contact form, which is www.derekherrera.com, or you can email us directly, forward@derekherrera.com. You can message me on Instagram or LinkedIn. And lastly, if you enjoy this podcast, I'd ask that you share it with anyone you think could benefit from these messages and these lessons learned from such amazing people, and consider leaving us a review or rating. It'll only take a minute or so, and if enough of us do that, it'll help us scale and reach new people and share these messages with even more people who can benefit. So thank you for listening. Looking forward to sharing this episode with you. Dave lives here in Orange County, California, just down the street from me. Loves ice hockey, startups, giving back to the community. He's been active in a lot of nonprofits, including American Heart Association. He's really generous with his time, and been fortunate to know him for 7 years now. Honored to call him a mentor, a friend, and an advisor. Dave, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Derek. What an introduction. I'm happy we're friends, and I enjoyed that you invited me here to talk. So thank you so much.
The pleasure's all mine. So Dave and I met. I had just started at UCLA as an executive MBA student there after leaving the military, and was really inspired to become a medical device entrepreneur and try to solve a problem that I had suffered from and had no clue what I was doing. And just out of fate, my neighbor, I'd moved into a new house, and my neighbor was, I believe, the VP of business development or international business development for Dave at that time. And so I had a conversation with him, and he's like, "Hey, what are you doing?" I was like, "Oh, I'm trying to start a business." He's like, "Do you know what you're doing?" I'm like, "Absolutely not." And he's like, "Oh, well, maybe my friend, my boss, Dave, he's really successful. He's had a couple of exits as an entrepreneur. Maybe he'll spend some time hanging out with you and help advise you." And sure enough, Dave did, and was very fortunate to have, met him, and became very generous with his time, and it was foundational for me. And I've learned a ton from him. So it's really fun to be here with you today and chat.
Yeah, that was Ryan Solomon. And He was our VP of marketing at Blockade Medical. And I had known Ryan for probably 10 years before that. And he had left and gone to EV3 to manage the launch of a new product. And I knew I was going to want to work with them again at some point in the future. And I hired him, and you guys were neighbors in the neighborhood. And I do remember that. So I'm very grateful for Ryan for making the introduction.
Yeah, I'm incredibly fortunate. And that's one of the lessons I've learned, definitely coming from the military, is how important, having access to talented and experienced people like yourself are. Something we didn't quite learn as much in the military, but I found and was really fortunate to have met you, because, some of the things and the lessons that I learned from you along the way, definitely changed the course of the company that I had started at that time, and have really enjoyed continuing to learn from you since then. So Dave, before we dive into what you're up to now, would like just to learn a little bit more and share for some of the audience about yourself, what it was like growing up, and kind of how you ended up where you were today.
Yeah, I grew up in Massachusetts, born and raised in Central Mass. I played lots of sports, but I focused on ice hockey and baseball. That's what I did. So yeah, every kid in New England, I think most every kid learned how to skate probably when they were 4 years old, and that's what I did. And my father coached most of my teams up until I was probably in Babe Ruth, probably 12 or 13. So I was always on teams. And I think I learned the value of teams back then because I was a decent athlete, but I was never the best. I had certain skills. I wasn't the goal scorer and I wasn't the home run hitter, but I was a good passer and I could field the ball and pitch. So, and I learned a lot about coaching at that age too. So, I eventually played sports in high school and college. And it was in college that this is probably late 80s, 88, 89. My grandfather had an ischemic stroke. And back in those days, there was literally nothing they could do for a person who has an ischemic stroke. I can remember going to nursing homes and seeing, other relatives there that had already had a stroke and they were either paralyzed or just non-responsive and they were waiting to die or just to become comfortable. But my father called me one day, and fortunately I was at my apartment and could answer the phone because there wasn't cell phones back then either. And said, "Hey, Pepe had a stroke. Come back to Leominster." So I did. Met him at the hospital and talked to the neurologist who was caring for him and said, "There's nothing we can do. He's not going to survive this or be the guy you knew." So he had a right-sided middle cerebral artery occlusion. So he could speak. Speech is controlled by the left side of your brain, but his left side was paralyzed. Because the right side of the brain controls motor skills on the left side of your body. But he was confused because the right side controls reasoning. And I don't think he knew who I was. And he was just kind of, talking loud to God. And it was the week of my sister's wedding also. So the neurologist asked me what I was studying. And I told him engineering. And he asked me if I ever thought about getting into healthcare, which I didn't even know what that really was at the time. I just thought I was going to go work for a car company, which I did interview at Saturn, which that was a big car company that came out in the 80s, and they were going to have a plastic car, and thought maybe I'll go do that. But as fate would have it, having this discussion with the neurologist and my father, I thought about, hey, maybe I should get into healthcare, and I still didn't really know what that meant, but he did pass away about a week later. That ischemic stroke actually transformed into a hemorrhagic stroke, and he died. So that fall, I went back to school and I began talking to my physician advisors and asked them if there was some type of an intern or co-op program that I could get involved with. And there was a school in Boston called Northeastern. They had a co-op program. Lowell didn't have this, so I made my own. So I ended up finding a job at a company called USCI. It was in Billerica, Mass. And they made the first angioplasty catheters for the heart. Interviewed there. I got the job working in the molding department, molding lures and hubs. But I was able to see how extrusion worked and see how they made catheters. And I knew, okay, this is something that I really wanted to do. So that inspiration to get into healthcare came from, a family member, having a stroke and dying. But I think I've been successful in this field because I've always been a team player. I worked on teams, and I know I'm not the smartest guy in the room or the smartest guy on the team, but I do certain things really well, and I complement myself with 4 or 5 other people, and I put them in the right seat. So that's how I got here, and I can't see ever leaving this business. I enjoy it.
Yeah, that's really powerful, and I think it resonates with a lot of people because everybody encounters these types of situations with healthcare or has a loved one that, if you live long enough, right, that they'll be in one of these situations. And then, it's really impressive that had that impact on you and that you were able to pursue that and push forward. And in the book, you actually talk about it, that I'll read from the book on page 33 at the end where you're talking about this, and you went on to invent a device that could have solved the issue that your Pepe had. And so it's,
He said, "While it didn't really sink in at the time, I was probably too pissed that he was telling me there was nothing he could do for my grandfather. Several years later, the doc's words came back to me. I followed his advice and wound up co-inventing a medical device, the stent retriever, to treat ischemic stroke patients with large vessel occlusions just like my Pepe had. The device looks like a small metal cage attached to the end of a long wire. The cage is collapsible, which makes it possible for a doctor to go in and grab blood clots or any occlusion in your brain and remove them from an artery or vein to allow blood to flow freely once again. If a solution like this had been available 18 years earlier, my Pepe probably would still be alive. While it's unfortunate that I was too late for my Pepe, I know that this device has helped lots of other people's loved ones since then, and it makes me feel really great about what I do for a living. This was my introduction to the power of innovation. I realized that I had the ability to solve problems that had caused pain to a lot of people. An invention that I had spearheaded was saving lives. I and my team had solved a real problem that touched a lot of people. The industry, I think a lot of people that I talk to that are young and figuring out what to do are looking for purpose and meaning. And one of the things that is very clear and apparent in this industry, which I've found and kind of what led me on a similar path to end up here as well, was the impact of what you do and why you do it. And so it's an incredible story. And,
I talk about it often, and I also see new problems on a regular basis. And it's sometimes a challenge to figure out or determine which ones you want to go after. But then at some point in time, it just becomes clear. You meet the right physician, you meet the patient or the future patient, and it's easy to make a decision. So, I'm very, very grateful to be able to, I work in an industry with great partners, and I get to work with doctors and see patients. I'm very fortunate. I have a lot of fun doing it too.
Yeah. And I think you mentioned something in there, which you mentioned before as well, which is probably a good transition, which is you talk about team. And so there's a couple of parts in here, but before I dive into, you outline how you hire people, what you look for, what the key attributes are, and how you manage them and coach them along the way, which I thought was a really, really interesting example. So, so before I dive in, I'll let you chime in on that and add any clarity you have on that.
Yeah, I mean, hiring a team is so critical and so crucial because it's the team that gets the work done. And if you didn't have a team, it'd be pretty hard to find investors. Because I think I'm hard pressed to find investors who invest in technology or invest in a market. They invest in people. So I've learned how important it is to add those people to complement me or my other partners. And it isn't just hiring the person that has the highest GPA or work for this startup or that startup. It's hiring people that really fit your culture. And it's easier to figure that out by asking questions that don't even apply to the job you're trying to hire. I mean, a resume is a resume, and you can tell where they worked and who they work for. It's, okay, can they do the job? Yeah. But you want to find people that really, really fit the culture. So I like to ask them. I mean, I guess when the person gets to me, I don't even ask them anything about their work. They're probably shocked. They're probably waiting for those stupid questions you hear, give me 3 problems you solved. And I ask them, do they coach? Do they have, I can't accept that they have kids because that's illegal, right? But I ask them, are you a coach? And what's the team you coach? So then I can find out, are they volunteering? Because, who gets paid to coach at our age? You're usually volunteering with AYSO or your Little League or some sporting event. Are you involved in some network? Are you involved in a foundation? And I'm in charge. I'm the chair for the American Heart Association. So if you can find givers instead of takers, then they're going to add to your culture that you want. And if they're teachers, then they're going to be able to work in teams very well. So you can find qualified people based on their resume and maybe where they went to school or call their references. Did they contribute on this project? But more importantly, are they coaches? Are they givers? So, those are the things that are hard to determine from reading a resume or meeting somebody at a conference. That's what I do. And then if that's the case, then I can put them in the right seat, and they'll help the team grow. And then you don't have to worry about dragging people to prosperity. You just do it together. Yeah. So
yeah, it's interesting, and I wanted to ask you too, because myself as a new entrant to the industry, what I found was, once you've been in the industry for a little bit, right, you've got a reputation and people know you, or they know your company or your tribe or whatever, right? You have a rep. But for people trying to break into the industry, right, for new college graduates or new high school anyone trying to get into the industry, I think you highlighted on some really interesting things that are ways to differentiate yourself. But I don't know what you think about that, or what other advice you may have for those people that are trying to get into the industry.
Yeah, there's lots of networks around here. Like in Orange County, we have Octane, we have Device Alliance, we have SoCal Bio. There's ENP, Executive New Practices, and I think they're all trying to do something different to differentiate themselves from these larger societies. But I kind of like to meet people who are part of societies where they have to volunteer. I was just at a meeting a couple of weeks ago. It wasn't ENP. I forget the name. I probably wish I would have remembered the name. But the two people who were leading the meeting, it was an engineer from Edwards and it was an engineer from Balt. And they're not getting paid to do this, but they're bringing people together in Orange County. I think there were 50 engineers there from other sectors. I think myself and the girl who was from Balt were the only ones in the neurovascular business. There were engineers there from ophthalmology, from biotech, from pharma. And it kind of made me realize I live in this small world of neurovascular, and there's so much going on here in Orange County that it was great to be able to meet these other people. But it was because these two engineers volunteered their time to put together a new society of young entrepreneurs. So I give them a lot of credit, a lot of kudos, because they're givers, they're not takers.
Yeah, that one, I think it's called Mix, right? Is
Mix.
That the
That's
Medical
right.
Innovation Exchange? Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, I just connected with Shima, who's from Balt.
She's the
recently
one.
I met her, and then I think when they were starting, actually, Bill Cologne had introduced me to Kenny, who was one of his guys, and Kenny Tran from I think he's at Medtronic, or actually he's at a different company now. But yeah, that's really interesting, and I think to your point too, I don't want to gloss over the other point, which is just community involvement, right? So I think now, and this is something that's very different from when you grew up and when I grew up, is now things are so intense academically and so competitive that everybody's shooting for the 4.0 to differentiate themselves and everything else and all of that. And that's great. Like, the academic knowledge is great that you got a 99.9 A++, not a 98.9, right? But like at a certain point, everybody's at that level, right? And like, when you see someone else who's coached a kid's soccer team, right, that's a very diverse, a very different skill set than required to sit and study and memorize stuff and pass an engineering test.
Right.
So,
yeah, and you're able to communicate. You need smart people. I mean, I saw an interview with Elon Musk the other day, and I've actually never seen him speak before. And really cool guy. You can tell he's different. Okay? I'm surprised he can't communicate because he's so different. Okay. But there's a lot of really smart people that I went to college with. They just could not communicate. So, but if they're volunteering, they're coaching, they're teaching, okay, that's a whole nother level than having a 4.0 GPA. So, and that's something is I like to tell people, you have to make mistakes. I like to make my own mistakes because that's the best way to learn rather than reading about it. But when you make a mistake, you have to own it and communicate about it and ask people, okay, if you can't figure it out on your own, which you probably shouldn't, bring in a team and talk about it. Okay, this is what I did. This is how I did it. And this is the result I got. where could I have done this differently? Because this is what I learned. And if you're unable to communicate those things, then you can't teach the team, you know? So, the smart kids, we all need them. I mean, but I was never the smartest kid in the room. I was always the one that could throw the baseball or skate, but I could always talk about it. So I think you need a combination of both to do the things that we were able to do. And if you can't communicate, you can't raise money. And that's another thing. If you can't communicate, you can't identify the real problem. And those are two key things in starting companies, is really being able to identify a real problem, come up with a real solution in a growing market, and then being able to make a pitch deck and raise money and build a team. So that all takes a high level of communication as well as understanding.
Yeah. I was smiling when you were talking about Elon Musk, because I have seen him speak in person, and it was really interesting, really, really interesting. So he ended up as a guest at an event we call the Marine Corps Birthday Ball for the 1st Marine Raider Battalion. And at that time, one of the people I'd worked with was the commander of the battalion. And so he invited me, even though I was out of the military, to attend. And so, Elon shows up in a room full of 3,000 Marine special operators and their families at this formal dinner event. And usually we have very polished speakers and like generals or commandants or, whoever, right, that shows up and has well-prepared, very politically astute remarks. And Elon gets up there and he just starts winging it. He's like, I was in traffic on the way over here thinking about what to say. And so, like, I could tell you the story about, like, SpaceX or Tesla, but, like, what do you, like, I'm trying to think of what might resonate with you guys and whatever. And he kind of worked through it a little bit. But what I took away from it during that engagement, he's on a different plane, right? Like, he just is too smart. And so it was taking a cognitive load. I watched, like, his brain, like, work hard to try to speak at a normal level that, Marines.
What do you do with that, right?
Right. And so, but he figured it out. He made it happen. And he talked for a few minutes and he told some cool stories. And then he actually opened up for questions, which is the first time I think I've ever been at a ball where there's like a formal speaker. It's like, hey, any of you guys got any questions? Wow. And so we asked him, and actually the question I asked him at that time was about hiring veterans and, and what he thinks about that. And he actually said, something similar to what you had mentioned about intangibles and traits, and said, hey, with veterans, I know you've worked in a team. I know you have a basic level of honesty, integrity, and, general intangible traits that'll help me. And so I don't have to screen you for that. Right. I can start screening you from here on, which I think is similar to what you said, where you talk about hiring athletes or volunteers or others. So that was really interesting. That was a fun engagement watching him figure that out.
Hopefully I get to meet him someday, but I saw him speak and I was like, he's in another level. Good for him.
Yeah, totally different level. But going back to what you said before, I had one of the things I wanted to point out, and I'll read from the book a little bit on who to hire and what to hire, is less on the traits, but more focused on the culture that you can create by managing these people. And something that's very, resonated a lot with me, because there are times in organizations that I've been a part of where they create a culture of what we call a 0 defects or 0 failure mentality. And inherently in early stage innovation or entrepreneurship, it's a recipe for disaster, right? It's not successful. And so from the book, Innovation and Translation, how to hire people who know how to fail and pivot. Assembling a team that is agile and confident enough to try new things in an R&D lab begins for me right at recruitment. I like to hire people who have experience with failure and understand it's a part of the process of winning. I like hiring former athletes for this reason, because they know what it means to train and prepare and then lose and get up and play another day. They understand that there isn't a player on earth who goes undefeated. They know that if you're going to win, you have to play, And if you play, some of the time you're going to lose. I like to hire people who are competitive because they'll push the envelope in order to win. And they're less concerned that sometimes when you push the margins, you go over the edge. Hiring people who have a familiarity with losing in the real world results in an agile and courageous team that's able to expect failure, make mistakes, and rebound readily from them with new and better ideas. I also like to hire and work with former military or people who've been in law enforcement. Why? Because these folks are disciplined and fundamentally team-driven. They've faced fluid circumstances with high stakes and have had to adjust in real time, often in life or death situations as a unit. In my industry, it's the doctors who are really taking most of the risk, but they will expect me and my team to be there and be prepared to help them adjust if a problem occurs. You and the doctor both have to be able to think while a patient is on the table, listen to what the doctor is telling you and be able to respond appropriately to help the doctor overcome the problem. I also hire a cross-functional team who come from a variety of specialties, cultures, and backgrounds because I like a diversity of opinions. I like to have people contributing all different points of view because that gives us more bites of the apple. I'll have 6 points of view around how to get around a problem, whereas if you have a team that all has the same experience and background and cultural orientation, you get 5 answers that are all the same. And then you continue on to talk about how when the team fails, what to do as well. So I won't read from the book about that part, but inherently failure is an essential part of success, as you highlight in the book. And
100%.
Love to hear your thoughts on that too, Dave.
Well, hearing you read about that reminds me of a time when I was in Buenos Aires, Argentina, I think in 1998, and I was working with a doctor there. We had a new delivery system to deliver an embolization coil, and the coil wasn't releasing from the delivery system. And I had noticed something with the power supply. A light wasn't coming on. And I'm in the OR, and I had a screwdriver, and I opened up the power supply, and it was a battery. But I had to go through this analysis and kind of go through a checklist, and I ended up weeding out a bunch of the things. I had to check wires and solder joints for all the connections. It ended up being a battery, thank goodness. I had a battery with me, replaced it, hit the button, the lights came on, and the implant attached. But the physician did not want to remove the implant from the aneurysm because of risk of something happening, whether the aneurysm would rupture or I don't know, but it worked. But I do remember being on my knees in the OR, literally sweating in a room that was probably 65 degrees. It was cool. But so the physicians are there with you, and they want you to explain what's going on and fix it. But, that's all part of making mistakes. And I think I had seen something similar to that on the bench and realized that we could have a battery failure. So I always had extra batteries with me. Yeah. And if you don't make mistakes, then sometimes you don't know why things work, right? If everything was always perfect and worked wonderful all the time, then you may not know why it worked because there's so many things that can happen that make it a success. And sometimes it's those 1 or 2 things that are the most critical parts. That is why it succeeded. And in this case, it was the battery. If the battery doesn't work, it won't work. Okay. But no, it's I don't discourage failure here. I mean, I encourage success, but if you make a mistake, okay, let's have a breakdown and let's educate the team. What occurred? What was your thought process? What did you do? And what was the result? And then let's try to analyze that and figure it out. I mean, hey, but that's just the way it is. As I said earlier, when you're an athlete, you can't win every game. I mean, I'm in a beer league team here in ice hockey, and I think we're 1-5 right now. We know the problem, our goalie, anyway. But the benefit of it is we have a bunch of great guys, and I've made like 6 new friends. So although we're losing, I don't care. It's beer league. I just made 6 new friends, right, that I can have lunch with or play tennis with or golf with. So this failure of not winning hockey games is something I'm not worried about because now I've enriched my life with 6 new friends. And I'm playing with my son, who's 26 years old. He's on my beer league team now. So yeah, I'm not saying look for the silver lining, which that's the name of our team, silver lining. But, you got to look for that. It's the ones who have the experience of working hard and losing can build that resilience, and you can overcome almost anything. And we also stay in our lane. So I've said this before, where my business is primarily interventional radiology, and yeah, could I have pivoted and done some other things over the years? Yes, but I just always enjoyed this business. But so I'm not, doing a COVID-19 vaccine or making rubber gloves. If I had a mistake there, I wouldn't have the experience to overcome that. I could probably figure it out, but it would take a long time. So when I form a new company and I'm raising money, the investors are investing in my team and I, because they know I've done something like this or something similar in the past, and I'm not pivoting to a whole new market. I'm staying in a lane, a wide lane that I know well. So when things go wrong or things don't quite work the way we wanted them to, I think we can look back on our experiences and kind of come to this resolution quickly.
Yeah. You said a lot of impressive and powerful things in there that I want to unpack. And so the last one, which you were just talking about experience, I think is really important to understand and to discuss. I know when I was a first-time founder in the medical device industry, it was incredibly challenging to raise money, to raise capital. And, even though we had a good idea, a good market, a good plan, we lacked experience, right? And we lacked an experienced team. And, at the time, I didn't truly understand the impact of the value that held. But now looking back on it, I do. And what I would claim for any aspiring medical device entrepreneurs out there is, if you flip the table around and look from their seat, there are so many things that could go wrong, so many areas of risk. Yeah. One that you can easily control for is experience, right? If you just find people who've done this or something like it before, like, that's almost no-go criteria for any real medical device investor. So instead of fighting it, right, like, you have to figure out and be crafty about how to find those people and get them interested in supporting your bid.
Right. Yeah. And, when entrepreneurs co-found companies, there's a little bit of ego there. It's
a little.
Well, there's a lot of ego there. It's my idea. It's just, I thought about this because I had the problem, which is all important. But if your experience isn't on the execution in designing, developing, getting into market, commercializing, then the idea may never get to market. The ideas are free. I say this. And that's always a challenge I have when I'm talking to physician inventors, physician founders, is, they're always concerned about the dilution. And I never come in and co-found a company and have the idea person have the majority equity ownership unless they're an engineer that has actually done it before. And I got four partners, and in some cases, I'll be like, all right, well, there's 5 of us, so let's divide, that by 100. And, there's, 4 of me and 1 of you, so it's 80% me and 20% you. And they're like, well, 80-20, that's a rip. And I said, well, you might look at it that way, but we're all equal partners. And the thing you're going to offer us is maybe you're going to test and evaluate the prototype, but you're not going to design it because I need an engineer that knows SolidWorks. You're not going to build it because I need an assembler that can solder or make a catheter. You're not going to really do the product testing as much as my engineer is because you don't know how to use an instron or a tensile tester or a burst pressure. You'll evaluate that it met the design input. You're not going to get it approved through the FDA or through the notified body. You're not going to sell it to customers because you're not a salesperson. You're not going to sell it to a company because you're not an M&A attorney. So there's 8 other people that are on that team, not just the inventor, the person with the idea. And then, we'll put, would you rather have 20% of something and get diluted to 5% and sell it for $100 million, or sit there and go to cocktail parties and brag that you have a patent filed, but it'll never get to market? So that's the conversation or the narrative I've been able to develop over the past 10 years and have it with relative ease and say it with a straight face, because I do have partners that work with me to do all those things and get it to market. And even before we do all those things, we have a way of assessing the solution for the problem, assess the big idea, and then raise the money. So, but these are things, I'm not a physician, they're not a business person, and you just have to find that harmony to work together. And, and as you develop that model and flow, it becomes fun and almost easy to do. Yeah, it's stressful and turbulent, but those are the times when you learn so much about yourself and your team, and you really invent and create. It's hard to explain unless you do it, so I try to articulate it. It just isn't always easy until you can actually witness it and see it. And we've had our challenges with investors. We've had our challenges with CEOs. We've had our challenges with physicians. But that's just the way it is. It's like having your challenges with a bad coach on your football team or a bad CO in the military, right? It's just the way it is. That's life.
Yeah. And just to reiterate the point that you're making, if you're a physician with a good idea or physician inventor or early stage medical technology entrepreneur, Dave explains all this in great detail in the book, Innovation and Translation. You can read it in a day or less. It's good stories and very tactical and practical information about that. And so definitely check it out. It's worth your time and worth your effort to pick up and read. Your point, though, is not lost, right? Which is, it takes a team of people with a variety of skills to get it there. And execution is everything, right? Ideas are easy. Everybody's got good ideas, but the ideas go nowhere unless you give it away, right? And give some other people a chance to help and provide input and to do those sorts of things. And even still, there's still a high rate of failure, right? For any of these early stage companies. And a lot of times it's because of people, right? People are the problem. So I feel like that's a pretty easy test. And so for anybody out there who's listening, who's a physician inventor, or, what we're talking about sounds even remotely like you, realize that this is a very simple test that anybody with even a modest amount of experience in the industry is going to ask you to go through, right? Which is is this somebody who's willing to work with, is willing to compromise, willing to work with someone? Is he serious, right? Because if he comes in here and expects to keep 100% of the company, and someone else is going to go raise the money, do the engineering, do the testing, do all, sell the company for him and make him rich while he sits on, he or she sits around and does nothing, you're not going anywhere. No, that deal doesn't exist, right? That's not happening. Your idea is no idea is that good. Frankly.
It's not going to happen. And a really good investor will not invest because the team is not incentivized. So the investor is going to want to ask this idea person, how are you going to keep all these talented people, if you're lucky enough to find them to work with you? How are you going to keep these people here and incentivized? Which is, it's kind of an oxymoron. It just doesn't happen. So everybody wants to be incentivized, and they could leave, a big strategic, a Johnson & Johnson, a Medtronic, to go to a startup because they want to succeed and make money and create value. Value comes in many forms. It's that life-saving device. It's money. It's freedom. Value comes in many different things. But if you can't incentivize people, then you're not going to get the team that's going to execute and stick with you when the road gets rocky. So, and I think that's also hard to explain. And, if an inventor or a physician founder or even an engineer founder is fortunate enough to hear that from an investor saying, I will not invest in you until you find the right team and actually incentivize them. This happened earlier this year. We co-founded a new company called Sonorous, and we have a device that we're going to develop to treat pulsatile tinnitus. And we met another physician who's from another part of the country. I'll mention his name. And he's got a great idea too, and he has patents filed. And we talked about our business model, and he didn't like the split in equity. And he even told me that he had spoken to several VCs in the Bay Area. And they said, hey, well, this is great. We love the market. It's a new indication. It addresses a need. But until you find a team, we're out. And this investor had already invested in several successful teams, and he even recommended one of these teams for this doctor to talk to. And I don't know what happened, but he came to me and said he's just going to go it alone. And this could be one of those patents that gets published. It gets issued. Maybe they pay their maintenance fees, and it becomes kind of a submarine patent. Because I don't think this will ever get to market, but I think it's good IP and could be a good solution for this problem. But if you are unable to incentivize the team, then you don't have a team.
Yeah.
It just doesn't
I see
work.
that time and time again. And at the end of the day, the reality is no one wins, right? You have a patent for a device that could help people, but it never gets to market. It never helps people and prevents other people from doing anything in this space either. So, not only I would argue that you have a financial, it's better in your financial interests to compromise and find the right team to help you, but it's also better for patients too. And, the fact that you get that device out there and actually start helping people. And ironically too, what you bring up is exactly what I experienced. And it took a little bit of time, but after I heard it from more than a few people where they said, hey, we like this idea. We like this market for this idea that you've developed and the startup you've launched. We just need you to have more experience on your team, right? Go find experienced team members. And if you do, I will write you a check. And that made it really easy for me. I was, easy, right? Like, okay, let's do this, right? And it turned out to be what I would say is, transformative for the company. We wouldn't be around probably if we didn't make that decision. And, so I can't stress that enough. And ultimately at the end of the day, the adage of 100% of nothing is totally true. So if you don't let go and allow other people to help out, you'll sit there and continue to struggle along the way and just fight. And frankly, that's not fun, right? Like when you have an ego and you're there and you're like, I can do it. And you just keep pushing and pushing and pushing. Like, I feel like we have a tendency to glamorize that.
Yeah.
But if it doesn't have to be that way, that's not enjoyable whatsoever. Like I've done some pretty hard things in my life and grinded, like even in the entrepreneurs, but it's working hard, but not smart. Right. And that's not enjoyable. And it doesn't help you in the long run. Right. So like,
well, an example is like, if you go back to sports, you look at, I'm from Massachusetts. So I'll talk about Tom Brady for a second. Okay. Here's a guy that would take pay cuts to open up the salary cap to bring more receivers and talent on his team so he could win more Super Bowls with his team. He could have said, you know what, forget it. I'm worth $100 million a year. I'm taking everything I can off the table. But he didn't do that. He took cuts, added to the team. I don't know, what's he have, 7 Super Bowls now? Right? And other players would go to that team just to win a Super Bowl because they know how short-lived an NFL career is. So it's the same thing in business. You want to win, and winning is getting your product to the market to help a patient. And if you're going to help a patient, then guess what? Someone's going to buy that company, and your stock options are going to be worth something. Then go do it again and again and again. Do 5 or 6 startups in one career. Don't just do one for 25 years because you're waiting for the payoff. Get base hits, right? Reduce your salary, take more equity. It's easy to say, but I've done that and it pays off. Add people to the team, dilute yourself to add talent to the team. That's what Tom Brady did for 2 decades, right? Yeah. It's the same analogy in sports and business, but ego, it prevents yourself from making that decision, and it's unfortunate.
Yeah, and I see it. I still try to help, and this is a really interesting conversation to have with people too. It's like once you see this picture and you see it, right, and you're like, I see your technology, I see the promise and the impact it holds, I see the market opportunity, I see all the successful the elements of success required for an early stage medical technology company. There's just one problem, right?
you're unwilling to let go, right? If you let this go and you let other people come in and help, like this thing's going to fly, right? If not, you're going to keep taking baby steps. And then maybe 15, 20 years, you're going to be in the market. Maybe if you're lucky, very lucky, but the life of your patent's gone, right? Like 20 years, you're on the clock.
You might get passed by a competitor. Physicians won't adopt it. You run out of money. I mean, there's so many things that can go wrong and have gone wrong. I mean, this is a discussion I had with several VCs. This was a few years back. I asked them if I could look at their graveyard. And this one VC said, why would you want to do that? It's like, well, you made some pretty big investments and there's issued IP, you've done a clinical work, but you failed. But a lot of heavy lifting's been done. Why can't we bring that to market? He's like, we're never bringing that stuff back. It's a black eye. It's an ego. It's an ego black eye. And there's still live IP, which eventually becomes expired because the maintenance fees don't get paid. But I would like to look at, you guys solved the problem. You created some value, and the wrong team. Okay, I wanted to see the graveyard. I've never been able to look inside of a VC's graveyard. They will never show you that. And you know the model. They invest in 10 deals. They lose their shirt on 7. They're swinging for the fences, and I get it. They want to put a lot of money to work and have a 20x. They break even on 1, and they get a 10x on 1, and have a 3x on 1. And that 10x erases all the failure of the other 7 losses. And there's a lot of successful VCs, and maybe some of them only lose on 5 deals, right? But still, you're never going to see the graveyard, which I think there's a gold mine in that graveyard somewhere.
Yeah, I would agree. Yeah, it's interesting. And the point, like you said, I think ego is important. And actually, one of the things I learned, so we were fortunate to go through a program called Y Combinator, which is not a med tech accelerator, but it's a tech accelerator. And they did a very few handful of medical devices and med tech companies and biotech and everything else. But they've got over 1,000 companies, tech companies. And when, we ask them about what's the number one reason companies fail, and, this is highly vetted, very talented, good ideas in Silicon Valley with the backing of the best accelerator, arguably in the world, and initial funding and everything. And the reason is founder drama. It's people, right? Yeah. They don't get along. They break up. They fight. That's the number one reason why those companies fail. And so it just reiterates, I think, the point that you've made, which is ego and people and all the aspects of that can't be understated in your bid for success and team, right? The focus on the team, which is something I think is really driven home well in your book, and you speak very eloquently about, which is, I function like a coach and, build my team and manage my team and try to ride them accordingly. So it's awesome. All right. So we're coming up on our scheduled time, so I won't keep you too long, but, have a few wrap up questions too before we close. I'd love to chat about. Love to learn more about. Actually, the one story too, which we didn't talk about, but it's in the book and is phenomenal. And we don't have to discuss the whole aspect of it because it's probably a very long and very interesting story. Probably could make a movie someday. But you talk about it a lot in the book. I won't go into detail about all aspects of it. I'll just frame it for you, but wanted to know how you stayed resilient and if there were any strategies you had throughout that experience that helped you continue to maintain a positive attitude and a positive mindset. And so the experience I'm talking about in the book, he calls Chasing Nirvana. And Nirvana is a company that Dave had co-founded after his previous startup it was a spin out from his previous startup once it was acquired. And, good idea, good product. Everything was lining up well. Everything was going well. And because of certain people that had gotten involved in situations that occurred, Dave ended up being forcibly removed from the company. And then also being personally and professionally sued by the company that he had founded. And so it's an incredible story, and you should check it out and get the book and read and learn more. It's something that entrepreneurs think about. And if you've been in the game long enough, is like something that you never imagined could happen, but is like a nightmare. Right. And so, I was hoping you might be able to talk a little bit about that and just share any tactic you had that helped you keep a positive attitude and continue pushing forward in the face of adversity throughout that situation.
Great question. And I've been asked this a few times now, and the lesson I take away from that story, which, as we said, we won't go into it because that could be a movie, is trusting your intuition. And we all have it. Some people call it their gut, right? We all have that intuition, and we know when something is right or wrong, or you just get that feeling. And I had flags going off from the first minute we spun Nirvana out of Blockade with, the first money in, the leadership. And I slowly tried to make changes by addressing the board and addressing the leadership. And even on fundraising, there was an investor that I spoke to, which may not be in the book, that committed to invest. And I knew internally the investment was not going to come through this one investor, but I was holding out, and I shouldn't have. And the company eventually did get financed, but I think how I communicated with the board, I learned a few lessons moving forward. I don't think I was as direct. I wanted things to happen that I felt internally were just not going to happen. I wanted the financing to occur, and I wanted it to be this one investor. But I knew it wasn't going to be this investor, so I just should have cut that off and pivoted and found a new investor. There was an investor that did come in, and I knew this was going to be an issue, but I thought I could fix it. I thought I could educate this investor about the market. And that just wasn't possible. I mean, some people, it's like moving a mountain. You know, they have an ego and you have an ego, and someone's going to win. And, I lost that battle. And then, the leadership, which were very talented in certain skills and assets they had, just not in the seat they were in. So I had the wrong people in the wrong seats. I had the wrong investor who just had grandiose expectations. And I had the right investor, which was never going to invest for various reasons. And I knew it internally. I had intuition, I had a gut, and I didn't use it. So for those who read the book, I think they'll be able to read into that. I knew it was wrong, and I did it anyway, and that's something I'll never do again. I have good intuition now. Well, I've always had it. I never used it, but I have a way of using my intuition. It isn't like I pray on it or I do something. I just know it, and we all know it. And now I act on it. So I would rather make the mistake of not doing something that I feel is wrong than doing something that I feel is wrong, thinking I can fix it later. Because it's other people's money, it's other people's time, and there's only so much time we have here to do what we want to do to bring product into the marketplace. So you should have a good feeling about doing it. You should have a good feeling about doing it with the people you want to do it with. And then you'll be more successful. But the key point is use your intuition, trust it, and don't ignore it.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. But I don't know if personally, while you're going through this and getting, beat up and everything else, was there any like personal tactics that you thought of, whether it was family, community, mission, or like anything that helped push you through those tougher times?
Yeah, so I was always involved in so many other things. So I wasn't hyper focused on the bad things that were going on at Nirvana. So I was still able to coach my kids AYSO. I was involved in American Heart Association Foundation. I was still taking trips with my high school buddies to go see the Patriots play. So I had outlets, extremely healthy outlets, to really continue to instill upon me that, God, I got to trust my gut here. This is wrong. So at the time when I was asked to step down from the board of directors, I didn't even argue because I knew there wasn't a fight in me that was going to change their mind. And I was getting reinforcements from my friends, my family, my SAGE group, which is a CEO group, my foundation, that, hey, you're a good person. You're making the right decisions. If this group can't accept it, then you don't need them. So just kind of cut it off and live with the loss. And eventually that's what happened. The company didn't do well. Investors lost a lot of money. And the rest is history. So it's unfortunate. But I took away from that. Yeah, it's over. No.
Yeah, it's done. And everybody's moved on, which is good. Yeah.
Can't dwell on it.
No. Yeah, I can't think of a better metaphor for forward thinking, right, than that. So excellent. And now on the backside too, it sounds like you're smarter, wiser, more experienced. And so I'd love to learn a little bit more about all the things you got going on. I know you have your hands in more than a few things, but you share a little bit about it in the book at the end and the epilogue, talking about My Blue Marble and trying to create a hub for neurovascular medical technology startups here in Orange County to try to improve the area and try to give back to the community that you're a part of. And so would love for you to share with anyone what you're working on, how they can learn more, how they can get involved, or how they can help.
Yeah, I really want to create jobs here, create a community here. I grew up in Massachusetts, and a famous Speaker of the House, Tip O'Neill, I think he was Speaker for Bill Clinton, and I don't know who else, but he always said all politics are local. Start locally. I might be upset what's happening in New York or Washington, D.C. or Paris, but it doesn't affect my life. It honestly doesn't. So if I can build a fertile backyard, take care of my backyard, volunteer, coach, start companies here, create jobs here, find investors here, have my family live here, then, I'll be able to keep jobs here. I'll be able to keep investors strong here. I'll be able to have a less stressful life here. And if we can all do that locally, then it kind of percolates up to Washington, D.C. or to these other areas. So what happened last year is unfortunate, and we're still going to manage through that. But I think people, tend to point fingers and put the blame somewhere else. And those people, I want to teach them to be entrepreneurs and really think locally. So as I left Vault last year, my first aim was to create a venture fund, a local venture fund from Orange County, which would support the companies that I'm starting here, which would still, hire people locally. And then there's a lot of strategics here. So if there's an acquisition, okay, the jobs stay here, the money stays here. And I have an older son who's 26. He's a sales rep for a local orthopedic company. I don't want him to move away. I want him to stay here and build his family. And I got an 8 and 10-year-old son and daughter. I want them to stay here. So if they could be part of the family business, the family office, that's why I look at blue zones and, they live longer. It's not because they eat healthy and don't drink alcohol. Actually, they do eat well and they do drink alcohol, but they walk to work, they garden, they live closer to family. There's multiple generations living within a 10-mile radius. That reduces stress. So there's so many things that you can do to just have your community thrive. And that's what I would love to see here locally. My mom's out here visiting for a month. I'd love her to move here. That would make my sister disappointed in Massachusetts. But if my kids can be around their grandparents and we can all work together and create a thriving community, then we'll all be happier, we'll live longer and be more prosperous. So That's what I'm trying to do at the ripe age of 53. So that's my aim.
That's awesome.
Yeah, I think it's incredibly noble and awesome. We're working through some of the same stuff. So, Maura and I are originally from Delaware. And so most of our family still lives out there. But now that her parents are retired and, and less tethered there, we're waging a campaign to try to get them out here and try to be here to hang out and help out and to build that kind of community, right? Because we love it here. We don't want to move ever. It's a great place to live. I'm more than a little biased. Lived here for 10 years and hoping never to move.
Right. Same here.
But it helps, right? It helps to have great connections with good family members and stuff out here. So, so that's pretty awesome. And so to read between the lines too, or be more direct, Dave has assembled a team that solicits ideas from any inventors, physicians or otherwise, specifically focused in the neurovascular space, to partner with and to do all the work that he mentioned there to commercialize. And so if you are a physician inventor or know of one who doesn't know where to go or doesn't know how to get started or hasn't read the book yet and needs to read the book, you can learn more about that at which website is it now, Dave?
Innovationandtranslationbook.com.
Okay. And then is it Quantum Fund or Treadstone Holdings or both?
TreadstoneOC.com.
Treadstone OC. Gotcha. Okay, cool. Yeah. And so, Dave and his team have been hard at work screening tons of deals, as you guys may know or may not know. When you're raising a fund, you have to have some deal flow. And so they've been looking and seeing some amazing things like Single Pass and some of these other ideas that are starting to come online and come to fruition, which is pretty
They're all
impressive.
on that board back there.
Oh, nice. Yeah. There's all the secrets. They're coming online. So
that's why I'm blocking it.
Nice. And so it's exciting. So if you have any ideas for technology, for innovative medical technology, or know people that do, definitely check out any of the stuff like Dave mentioned, innovationandtranslationbook.com. You can get it on Amazon as well, although I don't know that he'll sign it for you on there. And then if you're interested in learning more, go to their website and reach out to them and see if you can pitch them and see how your idea stands up and if it passes the framework, and see if you pass the test, right? If you're willing. Actually, I'll take that back. If you're not willing to let go and to involve other people, then don't waste his time.
Forget it.
But if you are, reach out to him and see and get on their schedule to share more. Awesome. So to wrap up, got a few questions I'd love to ask you.
Sure.
So what is one thing you would recommend anyone listening for them to do to make themselves more resilient?
So I like to say communication, but I would say listen first, think, then speak. I think listening is a big part of communication. And speaking first is what a lot of entrepreneurs and egocentric people tend to do. But I've also seen a lot of egocentric people take a step back and listen. And that's a lesson I learned early 2000s when I was at Microvention. I think I was one that, I can solve that problem. I'll just speak up and give my advice. And I alienated a couple of people. And I had a friend, Rich Capetta, who became CEO of Microvention, and he's moved on. He told me, he said, hey, the more you talk, the less people will listen to you. So if you're a listener and you don't speak much, they may think you're smarter. And then they're going to come to you later for advice. And I took that advice from him. And I don't know if I'd be where I am today if he didn't give me that advice. So I think listening first will make you more resilient, and that's part of communication.
It's awesome. Can't agree more. I've also struggled with that myself and had a lot of mentors tell me that too, right? It's
hard.
That it's really important for teamwork and for success of the team and also just in general, for diversity of opinions and ideas, not to overly insert yourself. And so I've tried to become more cognizant and aware of that myself. Awesome. Well, Dave, thank you so much for your time. Again, just to reiterate, this has been an episode of Forward with David Ferrera, where we're talking with innovative thinkers, critical thinkers, problem solvers, and people who've executed to create the future that they envision. We've had Dave Ferrera on, who is a successful medical device entrepreneur and currently building the Silicon Valley hub, essentially in Orange County, for neurovascular medical technology and medical devices. And you can learn more about that at Treadstone Holdings. You can also check out his book, Innovation in Translation, which I've read through and dog-eared and have plenty of stories I didn't even get to during this podcast, which is available innovationtranslationbook.com or on Amazon or anywhere else where books are sold, published by Forbes, which is pretty awesome too. So thank you so much, Dave. Thanks for everything you've done personally for me and for joining us today and sharing more about your story. Truly appreciate it.
Thank you so much. I had a great time.